Hi, everyone. I thought we're now halfway through the semester. Very difficult and new learning experience for all of us as things have shifted to online learning, and it's not easy. And I think that's why, as more and more of the grades for the semester are coming through, I'm personally getting a lot more questions and seeing more frustration than than perhaps I'd like, and certainly more than you would like. So, what follows here is some observations, some thoughts I have had both from my experience with Seneca and with my teaching at the Mars organization, and even from my experience, attending other online seminars. I hope this helps. So my first point is perhaps the hardest one, and that is that you are likely not paying as close attention to an online lecture as you do to an in-person classroom experience or classroom lecture. A very high risk of distraction, and those of you who have had some of the sessions with me so far know that I am practically begging you to turn video on, and some of that is for your benefit, some of that is for mine. I'd say maybe ask yourself this question of why am I not turning video on, right? There may be some legitimate reasons around bandwidth, but I think more often than not, there's other reasons. And usually it's because you know you're distracted. And so you should ask yourself, why is this and what is it I want to get out of this, right? The reality is it is really, really hard to pay attention during a live online lecture. And if you were going to watch a recording, it's even more difficult to stay engaged and pay attention through it all, right? I know myself, right? If I'm watching a recording, maybe I'm sitting in front of the TV. Hopefully, I'm actually, sitting in front of my computer at a desk. But even then, something comes through, or even if nothing comes through, I'll be like, I'm kind of drifting away. Whoever's talking isn't totally engaging me. I'll check my email, right? Maybe I'll check my phone. Maybe I'll walk away, right? Get a snack, right? And maybe I'll even doze off, right? I hope you don't doze off with anything I'm doing. But anyhow, I just, a little bit of thought-provoking stuff there too around self-awareness. And maybe one aspect is ask yourself, are you taking notes when you're watching, attending a live lecture or doing a recording? Even if you are attending a live class in person, face to face, right? Taking notes is a great way to make sure that you are paying attention with the balance that you won't want to be taking so many notes you're actually missing more of what's being said, right? But the great thing about online is, and especially if it's a recording, you have the ability to pause, right? Catch up on your notes, right? And so maybe just an idea, take notes during the lectures and use that as your gauge to assess how much am I paying attention. So a few specific thoughts about why I'm begging everybody, every class practically, to turn video on, right? The reality is that whether it's live face to face or whether it's in a recording or sorry in an online thing, right? If you're not asking me questions or providing me feedback, you're not engaged, right? And if you don't have video on, I have no way of knowing if you're engaged, right? In a live classroom or a classroom experience, if I see students that are on their phone, if they're kind of drifting off, talking to their classmates, or worse yet, getting up and walking out to go get a snack, right? These are signals that I'm not getting my message across in the right way, and I need to be able to adjust real time, right? And there's where it comes back to, you guys are my customer, right? So if I'm not getting any real time feedback from me, that means you're getting a reduced experience, right? And I want to make sure you guys are getting the best possible experience. Right? The other way to look at this is, in the business world, I always view my job is to make my boss's life easier, right? And although I'm not your boss, and this isn't the real world, right? But as a professor, my job is a lot harder when I'm not getting feedback, and I don't think you want to make my job harder, right? The fact is that if you guys don't have video on, right, and I appreciate those who give me thumbs up or hand waves or whatever, so at least I know you're there, right? But presenting something without feedback, it's just boring, right? And I do this because I really enjoy helping, and when I'm not getting that feedback, I don't know what's happening there. So and then maybe the unfortunate part is, when I start getting follow-up questions after the lectures, right, and there are things that I have talked about, and I know that if someone's paying attention, they would have picked up on, right? And so when I get you sending me an email saying, "Hey, Professor Patrick, better yet, what about this?" Right? What you're actually doing is shining a bright light on the fact that you weren't paying attention or that you haven't watched the recording, right? Which is maybe not the best thing to do. So those are my thoughts on why I'm asking you to turn video on, and I would still encourage you to turn your video camera on, please, if it's even remotely possible for you. The other aspect about, when the schools have come out, not just Seneca, all the schools, right, and said, classes are primarily online or classes are online, that should not be interpreted as easy or easier, right? The reality from what I'm seeing is that, online is actually harder. It's going to take more effort to achieve the same result that you would have otherwise, right? It's more difficult for you to arrange things with your fellow students or your professor. It's more difficult to engage, and it's more difficult to collaborate on group work, as you're seeing in this class with your fellow students, right? The other part of this is, because the school has said, not just Seneca, all schools have said, you don't need to attend lectures live. You can watch them on your schedule. It may mean that you've made other plans, right? Jobs, family commitments, etc. That's your choice, right? But if the classes aren't any easier, and they're not, maybe they're even harder, right? And you've loaded up other things in your life, that actually makes it harder for you to balance and make the time to invest in your online education. And on that point of investing in your education, right? The reality is you're here to learn, and you get out of this what you put in. Your grade is simply the measurement of that, right? So I view this as, my students are my customers, right? And I want them to get the result that they're paying for, which is to learn, right? You're not paying for an A or a B, right? You're paying to learn, right? The grade is simply one way that I can measure how much I think you have accomplished this. And I know you probably view it as a measurement of success, right? And that you want to be able to say you have a high GPA or I got an A in that class when people ask, right? The reality is it's rare that anybody asks, and it's even more rare that it matters to anybody. Certainly, if you're going for a top job and you want to have that top 1% of the GPA, right? I get it, right? But in a lot of cases that's not the situation, right? And it's better viewed. Your grade is better viewed as a self-awareness tool, right? So if you aren't getting the grade that you wanted so far, right, you still have lots of opportunity to change that, right? But the reality is, if you aren't getting the grade you wanted, then you haven't shown me how much you are learning, and that's what it's all about. So on that note, how do I get an A? This question starts coming through around this time in the semester, right? So a few specific thoughts to this course, right? The first is that your idea is not at all a part of the evaluation, right? Early in the semester, I gave the students feedback on, what do I think of the problem and the solution, and that was largely geared around. I have the advantage of being able to see ahead and what the assignments are that's coming forward, and sometimes there are some that may not, enable you to do your best. They're just going to naturally prove themselves to be more difficult. So I would have given feedback early on, right? But regardless whether you change your idea or not, your idea itself is never a part of the evaluation, right? What I'm looking for is show me that you have learned and that you've learned a lot, right? So demonstrate that you've taken the feedback and you've learned, you've adjusted, right? And ultimately, in this class, you know, the real question is how have you changed your problem or refined or tweak your problem or your solution as a result of what you have learned, right? If you're sitting here, midway through the semester and you've got exactly the same problem and solution that you did in week 3 when we started this class, then you haven't learned, or at least it shows me that you haven't learned because you haven't adjusted things, right? So that's the first one. The other would be approach, these assignments with a dual mindset. Think of them both as an assignment and as a real life business idea. And that's about engaging with passion. Like maybe I really do want to go do this, and I want to learn about how to do that most successfully. Right. Third aspect is follow the instructions. Follow them, please, carefully. Right. And if you're unsure of them, ask me questions, all right? And ideally, ask those questions during the lecture. You'll notice that when we're going through the assignment part, I'm asking if there's any questions, and there's silence, like in almost every case, right? And then sometimes I even make the comment that that just means I'm going to get more emails later, right? It's always more difficult for me to try and clarify things via email, right? Verbal communication is always the best, right? And reality is, if you've got the question, I guarantee you're not alone. Others are. So I really appreciate when you ask questions during the lecture, the live lecture, because that gives me the opportunity to answer that for everybody's benefit, including those that are going to watch the recording later. So another thought is, please be thorough, be professional in what you're delivering, right? Show some creativity and submit it on time. You don't want to lose marks just because you're late, right? Um, the second last point is, participate, right? Participation is 15% of your mark, right? And that's a combination of your teamwork within your team, but it's also my assessment on how much are you engaged, right? So engage and participate with your group and in class, right? And in the coaching sessions that we have afterwards, right? And finally, although we're not evaluating the idea, we're evaluating how well you've evolved it and how well you're pitching it, right? That is the ultimate goal of this course, right? So ask yourself, have I been able to communicate, a strong business case that would convince somebody I don't know to invest in my idea, right, or my solution? So hope that helps.